Get some comment and analysis. Eddie Glaude joins us. He's chairman of Princeton University's Center of African American Studies. Thank you so very much for being with us. We've seen in our report the extent of people's anger and the demonstrations continuing. We've also heard within the last few moments that the police officer who knelt on Mr. Floyd's neck, causing his death, is to be charged with second-degree murder. In terms of what you're seeing and how these things are happening, where do you feel it goes from here, sir?
Well, I think that's a very good step. I think Attorney General Keith Ellison reviewed the evidence and came to the conclusion that it warranted a second-degree murder charge, and it also warranted charging the other officers for aiding and abetting a murder, which is a felony offense. But to be honest with you, for African Americans, this is only a beginning. We have seen officers charged in the past and acquitted. There is no guarantee that once tried by a jury of their peers, that they will actually be held to account. And so there is a degree of satisfaction, but no, people aren't satiated in the sense that they are continuing to bring pressure to bear on the country to fundamentally transform the nature of policing in our country. And that will go on for a while until we see substantive change.
And the nature of policing in the broadest possible sense, I'm talking about from the very top, the White House, down to the streets. It needs to be changed on all those levels, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. So when you look at that footage of the urban unrest, and you see the police bracket the tear gas, bracket the rubber bullets, and just look at how every encounter is full of violence. It seems to be full of contempt and insult and spite. That's how Black communities in the United States are policed regularly, daily. So what we saw in the protest, African Americans experience on a daily basis. What does it mean for police to pull up on a group of African American young men and women and tell them to get up against the wall or throw them against their police vans? We see this kind of aggressive, violent encounter every single day, and then it results in harm or in death. And then all of a sudden people are clutching their pearls asking, what must we do? Well, I think that we need to do a couple of things immediately, and we need to hold the police accountable for their actions. And that's going to require us to address qualified immunity. We need to begin to decriminalize certain acts. We need to demilitarize our military. And we need to invoke a kind of national standard for the use of force. Those are just baseline elements, baseline moves for us to do in order to begin to correct policing in this country.
And most of all, the killing of Black people, Eddie Glaude, has to stop.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we live in a society where, how can I put this? The value gap obtains, where there's this belief that because you're white, you're valued more than others. And we've been grappling with this for generations. My father had to go through this. His father had to go through this. And now my son has to go through this. And each generation, we lose people for no damn reason. It seems to me that we're on the cusp of change. And this change is not just simply in the United States, it's across the globe. People are feeling the brunt of the state on their necks. And there's an outcry for fundamental change and an outcry to say that something has happened here, we're not going to take it anymore.
In terms of what happens next, in terms of the changes that need to happen, and I think I agree completely with you, and anybody with a fair mind would also agree with you that these changes must happen now. We've seen the images of George Floyd's daughter saying, "My daddy's changed the world." Do you feel that young girl's optimism in this moment of tragedy for her personal tragedy, is going to be something that is fulfilled? Do you think that she will, in 10 years' time, say, yes, my daddy did change the world? Or do you fear that it won't happen?
Our history, the history of this country, suggests that we should not be optimistic. We failed miserably. When these sorts of moments, these conjunctural moments happen, we tend to double down on the ugliness of our commitments. You can imagine that most of the young people who are protesting, they were basically teenagers when Mike Brown was killed in 2014. And all of those young people risked their lives, right, to change the way in which America policed our communities. And 6 years later, in 2000, 6 years later, here they are risking their lives. And they're risking their lives, not just simply with the fact that they're confronting police, but they're protesting in the midst of a global pandemic. They're choosing to risk death in order to call the nation to account. I'm not optimistic. I never have been. I come out of a blues tradition. But I'm hopeful in the capacity of everyday ordinary people to risk everything to force this country to change.
And your eloquence at expressing that speaks volumes. I think the message is loud and the message is extremely clear about what needs to be done. In terms of going forward from here, we've heard that the Minnesota Attorney General, who's brought the charge of second-degree murder against the officer Chauvin, who was kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck, he's calling for people to basically be calm and patient and let the legal process work in the way that he says it will work. Do you think people are going to accept that? Because looking at our report, listening to what people are saying, it doesn't seem like people are going to suddenly stop demonstrating, go back home and wait.
I don't think so. Look, this is all happening again in the context of COVID-19, where 40 million people are unemployed. African Americans are disproportionately impacted. We're dying at higher rates than any demographic in the country outside of older people who are in nursing homes. So choices have to be made. But look, there's no way that A.G. Ellison can say in good faith to Black people and to those who are allies with him that we should have faith in the criminal justice system. It is because those folks got in the streets and protested that Chauvin was arrested in the first place. It was because of the video that came out showing three white men literally hunting down Ahmaud Arbery and killing him in broad daylight, because for months those murderers, right, walked around free. There's no way that one can just assume that we have faith in the criminal justice system. We just simply have to make the choice. How do we react? How do we respond in this moment when a global pandemic is literally killing us? That's the question, as we wait to see what the criminal justice system will do with these officers who publicly lynched George Floyd.
Indeed. And as to reinforce your point, so many hundreds of thousands of people risking their lives, as you pointed out, Eddie Glaude, to go out and to demonstrate in this time of a pandemic. Let's go back to the incident, caught on camera, so no one can cry fake news. No one can stand there on high and say, this didn't really happen. It was all seen, caught on video. Is the message to Donald Trump, to the White House, to the people in power that, look, this is happening. You are the people who need to affect change. And, of course, this is an election year.
Yeah, there's no expectation, at least I don't have an expectation, that Donald Trump and the folks who support him will imagine or will do anything that will respond to what happened to George Floyd or respond to criminal policing in this country. I think the power that we're witnessing is the power of everyday ordinary people. You see, for 40 plus years, we have lived under an economic philosophy that has simply had American workers or workers around the country, by the throat. We have been struggling to make ends meet. We have been struggling to put, to imagine a future for our children. And we have been doing it in a way that's been overdetermined by the country's racist history and racist present. So in this moment, there's no expectation from Donald Trump. He is a representation of the rot that's at the heart of the country. Instead, I think what everyday ordinary people are understanding is their power. We have to take back our countries. We have to assert our power in this moment. And we have to insist, at least in the United States, right, that we leave behind this ideology of white supremacy that distorts and disfigures democratic ideals and imagine ourselves anew. Coronavirus has forced us to figure out how to be together differently. That involves finally leaving behind this idea that because you're white, you ought to be valued more than others.
Eddie Glaude, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Chairman of Princeton University's Centre of African American Studies. Thank you, sir, for sharing your analysis and your thoughts at this time.